Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports with Frank podcast. Another review episode today with the Bundesliga having its last game of the week and just ended 5 minutes ago. I'm recording now to talk to you about my ideas and my thoughts about the weekend, and also to get a bit of an insight and a preview of what's coming on Tuesday and Wednesday, because of course the Bundesliga is coming back 48 hours from now, so it's going to be another interesting set of games, and of course the main one being the Bayern Munich Borussia Dortmund game coming on Tuesday afternoon. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about my ups and downs from the weekend, the players that I think put themselves in a better position going forward, and maybe teams or players that did not do so. So another packed episode. Let's get into it. This is the Sports with Frank podcast. I'm Francesco. It's showtime. Another week of German football came to an end just a few minutes ago, and it was great. Let me tell you, I had a lot of fun this weekend. I mean, the thing with the Bundesliga is that I haven't really paid attention too much about small teams so far. Like, I'm Italian, so I watched Italian football. I watched a lot of Premier League. I watched La Liga, of course, and, a bit less now, but back then when we had the Ronaldo-Messi matchup, of course. And the German league was never something that I really particularly enjoyed watching, because there was always this idea that Bayern was going to win the league and there was no reason to watch. Then a few years ago, with the Borussia kind of resurgence with Jurgen Klopp, where they managed to win 2 titles, so that was a bit of fun, and I used to watch quite a lot back then. But Bayern came back again, and I just didn't really feel, that much the need to go into it, and I think I made a mistake. I've been making a mistake for years, because there is a lot of fun going on in these games and a lot of goals being scored, and honestly also a lot of young players, which I think were gonna be prominent in the world of football in the next few years. But as every recap episode goes, we're gonna be starting with stocks up and stocks down from this past Bundesliga weekend. Now, my first stocks up for this week belongs to the fullback position. Now, I think, as someone that's been watching football for a long time now, I'm going into my 17th season of properly following football. I started watching back in 2006 when Italy, went in and won the World Cup. And I remember the first game I've ever watched in full was Italy against Ghana, as the first game of the group stages for them in 2006. We won that game 2-0. And, since then I've been watching how the game evolved. I've been watching what positions have been more and more important with the time. Every year there is always like the new tactic coming in. There was a tiki-taka by Guardiola, and then the Sarri ball and other, all these tactics. And it seems that there's always something that comes in and changes the way people look at every single position. But there is a position that I think has always been constant, since the late 2000s and going into the 2010s. The fullback position has always been critical, in my opinion, for a team that wants to compete. Now, if you look back at that Italy team, when we won that World Cup, we had Grosso, of course, who scored a goal against Germany. He scored the winning penalty against France. But before and after that World Cup, Grosso was never a transcendent player. Okay, he was very good for that World Cup and he did great for us, and I'll always be grateful to the guy. But at the end of the day, he was an average fullback, right? But during this World Cup, he just stepped it up and he played brilliantly throughout the tournament. On the other side, though, we had Gianluca Zambrotta, and I was watching some of those Italy games a few weeks ago, and Zambrotta is, honestly, I didn't remember how good he was. And why was he good? He was good because he was able to attack and defend with the same intensity and going up and down the right side. And of course, he could play on the left as well. He was amazing being able to kick the ball with both feet and not losing a beat. And watching back those games, I was thinking, man, even in 2006 when I started watching, I didn't appreciate how important a guy like him was towards the efficiency of a team. And this tendency of fullbacks to becoming more and more offensive has just been growing and growing. If you think about the early 2000s, there's a lot of teams that, they play the center back as a fullback because you provide them with a better coverage, and it was something that was very effective back then. Even Paolo Maldini, one of the greatest Italian defenders of all time, he played as a left back, but his true nature eventually showed up to be his center back, where he played his best football. So he was kind of adapted on that side. On the other hand, now the more we go, we evolve in football, the more it seems that managers go for more offensive players on their defensive sides, and that's because that provides you with a lot of unpredictability to attack the opposite defense, and having two extra players that not only can attack and be prominent in your offensive scheme, but they can also provide you with a lot of coverage because they're able to run for like 15k in a game without showing any signs of tiredness. So I was thinking about it, and this weekend, by watching the games, I just thought to myself, man, that's right. The fullback position is much more important than what we think. Because nowadays, when you think about fullbacks, there's a lot of average players and a lot of teams that they just go for the guy that's not going to make the mistake. But then if you look at winning teams, those are the teams that have great talent at fullback. So of course, if you've watched the games this past week, and I'm referring specifically to Hakimi and Guerrero for Dortmund. But also, I would like to point out that the other big team in Germany, Bayern, has Alphonso Davies, which I'm telling you, I never thought a left back could be one of my favorite players to watch, but currently he is. Not just because there is no football, but even when other leagues come back, I'll be watching Bayern because this guy is phenomenal. He's 19 years old and he plays with this confidence, and he puts, like when you see him play, you wouldn't tell this is his first big time year in Europe, because he was at Bayern last year, but he didn't really play much. This year he stepped in, and to have him play at Bayern, they decided to move Alaba to the centre back position. Now that was also a way for them to kind of cope with having certain centre backs missing from the lineup because of injury. But nonetheless, Alphonso Davies stepped in and took that spot from a guy that's been there for 10 years almost, and has been playing at an elite level. And you wouldn't think that someone like a 19-year-old Canadian guy can come in and take that spot from Alaba, but he did. And on the other side, they have Pavard, that honestly, when I watched him at the World Cup in 2018, I wasn't convinced on the guy. He was playing for a smaller team. I felt like that French team was so good that anybody could have played a right back and it wouldn't have made a difference. But the more I watch this guy now, the more I'm convinced that Bayern did an amazing job to get him for that low, really, because they only paid in the range of the 35 for a guy that has already won a World Cup at his age, and I can only see improving. So if you take those two couples of fullbacks, so Hakimi and Guerrero for Dortmund, and Pavard and Davies for Bayern, the thing they have in common, they are all of those four players are different players. They're different in the way they interpret the role of a fullback, but what they have in common is that every time that the teams are attacking, you see them coming over, giving the lane for a pass, or it's impressive, especially for Dortmund. You see Hakimi going forward and he's basically playing striker on the wing, because Piszczek is able to move from the center back position in the back three defense to right back, so he covers for him. That allows Hakimi to go forward. He puts the ball in, and Guerrero is already on the other side to tap it in. And the way Dortmund plays with its fullbacks is literally the perfect way to interpret a game when you have this kind of talent at the position. Because if you have a player that can basically play like it's two players in one, provides you with as much talent on the offensive side as they do on the defensive side, that gives the manager a lot of options. And of course, we'll talk about it more in Friday's episode, because I'll go into this topic during the storyline. But this is just another example of positionless football that I think the current world of football is going towards. And I think that Guerrero and Hakimi in this particular case are the perfect examples. On the other hand, Davies and Pavard. Pavard really starts his career as a centre-back. For Stuttgart, he's been playing centre-back. He was moved as to a right-back position by Deschamps during the World Cup. And now as Bayern, he's been playing right-back as well, because that allowed them to move Kimmich back to the centre-mid position where he can give his best. Now, when you think about a centre-back being moved to a right-back position, you think, oh, this guy is going to be blocked, he's going to stay back and basically be a third defender doing the offensive side of the play. But that's not the case at all. Pavard is always forward, is such a danger with crosses from the left side by Davies. He has scored 2 games ago, and is a threat with his head and the ability to basically cut inside from the right side towards the goal, having being in there when the cross comes. That also provides Lewandowski with a lot of freedom to hit his own shots because the defense has to cover for him. Now that can open up certain deficiency in the way he defends in those particular situations, but he's very very good at deciding when the best time is for him to go forward and do this particular play. And the idea is basically that he plays in tandem with someone on that side. This week was Coman, which is not as defensive as you could think, but he can provide enough coverage for him to go forward. Of course, if the guy playing in front of him is someone, I don't know, like a Gnabry or someone even more offensive than Coman, that could be harder. But I think if the team is built around this ability that he has, he can do a lot of damage. And then Alphonso Davies is just a monster. The guy is so fast. Now we're talking about a guy that's going to be starting for Bayern for a long time. And he deserves to be the starter because the ability he has to get forward over and over again over the course of a game, it's incredible. And he has the ability to dribble players as well, which is, something that adds to his arsenal and makes him extremely dangerous. So, winner of the week for sure, the fullback position. And, as I said at the beginning, if I think back how good, certain fullbacks were in 2006 when I started following football, I kind of regret not giving it too much of an importance for a long time. But the more I watch these winning teams, the more I realize that that's the way it has to be for that particular position. Offense, defense at the same level. So going forward, I think we're going to see more and more of these players. Over the years, of course, we had Marcelo, Dani Alves. Most of them were South Americans. But now even European fullbacks are getting to that stage of being, incredibly offensive and incredibly defensive as well. Another Guerrero's from Portugal. Cancelo is another one of these players. He plays for City, of course, but he has to, still has to grow in terms of being able to defend well. But he's very, very good on the offensive side of the ball. So he could be another one to look out for. And then I think Guardiola showed people how you basically convert players to a certain position in order to make them produce more, because they give you the extra that normal fullbacks usually don't give you. He moved Kimmich there, which allowed him to play incredible football from the side because Kimmich has the feet of a regista. And so he had basically a regista playing right back. And very similarly with Zinchenko now at Man City. You have to look at these bright minds, bright football minds. Guardiola is the one that comes to mind because he has changed football for real. Like the way he introduced the tiki-taka at Barcelona was taken as example by several teams after that. And when you see someone like him trying to move centre mids or wingers to the fullback position, it tells you what the way forward is. And look at the teams that have won the Champions League in the last few years. Even Liverpool. Liverpool has the best right back in the world right now in Trent Alexander-Arnold. And, the guy is basically another forward for them when they attack. And that you can't teach that. That's just something that's in your DNA. And if for teams to achieve that, they have to move players from striker, from left wing, right wing, to the fullback position, I think they will do it. if they think the guy gives enough insurance. Basically, it gives enough certainty of being able to, even defend when the ball is in the other team's court. So we'll see how this evolution of the fullback progress even in the future, but I think it's getting clearer and clearer how important that position is to a winning team. Moving now to my first stocks down of the week, that's definitely Borussia Monchengladbach. Now, this is the team that I talked about in the last episode as, a very young and promising team with a lot of talent in there, especially Marcus Thuram. And I think they played a decent game overall against Leverkusen this past week, but they were playing at home. I know that now with no crowds, that's not as much of an impact on the game as it was before, but you also have to consider that at the end of the day, they had, the time to prepare on their own ground for this game. And this was a crucial game for them because they entered this game as third in the league with really, if they won, a chance to, stay attached to Bayern up there because, it's only 6 points. They weren't that far away. And now they find themselves being 9 points behind and in 5th place. And in the meantime, the team that just beat them, Bayern Leverkusen, has moved from 5th to 3rd. Now, in terms of a Champions League spot, this is no way the end of Monchengladbach's string because they're still close. They're probably gonna make this a race until the end because those German teams, especially the middle table ones, are very inconsistent. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some weird losses for both of those teams, some weird wins. But at the end of the day, I think they'll be, they'll compete for this until the end. However, the reason why I put them in my down stocks of the week is because they could have pulled away with this game. They could have gone up 5 points on Leverkusen. And I'm not saying having and locking down the Champions League spot, but they would have been so much better positioned than what they are now. And even if they fight until the end, Leverkusen has their destiny in their hands. They are ahead now, and they can just they just have to hold on. But they count on themselves to make it to the Champions League, while Monchengladbach will have to win and hope that Leverkusen loses some points along the way. And if they manage to, this game was even. I don't think it was one-sided. Yes, Leverkusen won 3-1, but at the end of the day, without that penalty, this game was open. It was wide open. And both of the young players that I talked about last week, Havertz and Thuram, they both shined. And for some reason, Thuram was substituted in the second half while he was the best player on the pitch for Monchengladbach, hands down. And I think another thing that comes out of this match is how Thuram is really a striker. He started the game on the wing, and for the first 25-30 minutes of the game, he was quiet. He wasn't making big plays. He wasn't using his physical abilities to get the ball moving forward towards goal, right? In the second half, he was moved to the striker position, and then he scored right away. And he kept playing striker for the rest of the game. He had another big chance during the second half before he was pulled out by the coach. But as a striker, he ran wild against Bayern Leverkusen's defense. And I believe that he's probably going to move there permanently in the next few games. They're probably going to try and keep him on the left side because they don't have any alternative at the moment. But I think even moving towards next season, he's probably going to be considered more of a striker than he is a left wing, which is where he's been playing so far. And he did well, and I think the whole team did well. I think they fought and they stayed in the game as long as they could. Unfortunately, on the other side, there was this phenom by the name of Kai Havertz, and I talked about him in the last week's episode. He's just, I don't even know how to describe him. I was reading some comments on Twitter and just going around the internet how this guy is just hype. He's not as good as he seems because in Bayer Leverkusen's gameplay he is the focal point, so of course he's gonna shine. But that's not at all what happens here. Like, if you watch the game, you can tell that he's the guy that makes the team work. Without him, I don't know who could actually make a play in that team. Because Leverkusen is a solid team, and even up front, of course, they had Diaby, who came over from PSG, young French winger, They have Bellarabi, that's been there for years and always been consistent. They have Jamaican Bailey on the bench as well. I think could be a good player in the future, but without Kai Havertz, this team doesn't work. And at 20 years old, you cannot stress this enough. That's incredible. At the end of the day, your 20-year-old striker or forward or whatever you want to call him, you come in a team, you're already a captain at that age. That's incredible on its own, and you basically make the team play well with your plays. There is a play at some point on the penalty that was basically given to Leverkusen, even though I believe that it wasn't, but we're not here to argue against referee mistakes. A penalty was given to Leverkusen for a foul on Bellarabi. If you watch the play, and if you go back and watch who gave the ball to Bellarabi in the space, it's of course Kai Havertz. And the ball that he gives at his size, the coordination he has is just, I don't think I've ever seen a player that tall being so good handling the ball since Ibrahimovic. Like, he has really, he honestly physically reminds me of the big, Ibrahimovic of his Ajax days before he moved to Juve, because of course then he got bigger and bigger, especially during his time in Inter and growing. But when he moved to Juve, I think he was 23 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He moved here, he was skinny. His mind, it was a very tight, tiny frame in the sense of he was tall already, but it wasn't thick, there wasn't a lot of muscles there. And Havertz reminds me a lot of that, and I've always been amazed by Ibrahimovic and his ability to coordinate, and I think Havertz can go towards that kind of physical, presence and ability to kind of mix that with his incredible feet. So if he manages to get there, this guy's going to be unstoppable. I think the more games I watch, he has Bayern Munich stamped on his forehead. Bayern Munich bound, for sure. I know that Leverkusen tends not to sell players to Bayern because there is a lot of rivalry between the two director of personnel, but I think it's going to end up there. He's German, he's going to go to the biggest German team there is, and I cannot wait to see Sané, Havertz and Gnabry all playing together. That being said, I just want to go back to Monchengladbach, which at the end of the day are the main focus of this Talks Down. And I think, I don't think they play poorly. I don't think they have compromised anything by losing this game. But the reason why I put them in Stocks Down is because I think they should have they had to win this game, because that would have made them a very serious candidate to lock a Champions League spot before the end of the season, and knowing that this is going to be a very tough end of the season. There's going to be a lot of injuries due to the fact that they haven't played for a while and they're all coming back to a pretty high level. I mean, the football that you see is not, what you usually would see top form for footballers, but it's not even August football, So I think they should have won this game, because we never know what can happen. We've never been in the position of playing leagues into July, and we don't know what can happen. So it would have been, in my opinion, much better for them to win this game to be safer at that spot. They couldn't, because, as I said, Kai Havertz came and rocked the team up. But at the end of the day, I think they could have done something more to get that, to get there, maybe get the win, or even a draw would have been better, because now they have to hope that Leverkusen loses some points along the way, and that's never good for any team. And now we have the second Stocks Down of the week, which is going to be the last one of this segment, because there wasn't much else that impressed me positively over the weekend. So I want to talk now about Frankfurt. So Frankfurt is a team that hasn't won a game since February 7th. Frankfurt is a team that last year made it so close to get to the Europa League final, with only one penalty kick away from beating Chelsea and getting to play against Arsenal. And probably, I'm not saying they would have won, but the team was playing well. It was providing a lot of fun for everybody who was watching. Kovac was doing an incredible job with the team he had. They won the German Cup against Bayern in the final. That was the game that, of course, basically sent Kovac to Bayern. that didn't go too well, but nonetheless, that was as an impressive performance as it was. It resulted in the coach be taken by the other team to coach this season. And they made a mistake. They made a mistake by selling their top stars. Jovic was gone. Rebic went to Milan. And they didn't really bring anyone in that was going to replace them. Not only in terms of performances, but also as the role inside the locker room. Rebic has been at Frankfurt for a few years. He was in Frankfurt for a few years, and he was one of the main guys in the locker room. When you lose someone like that and you don't bring anyone back that can replace him in a sense, it's always going to hurt your team. And of course, then you sell Jovic, that last year was incredible for Frankfurt. He hasn't been as good for Real Madrid, but he is a 23-year-old striker that has to adapt to a new philosophy, to a new team, new pressure. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. I think he's going to be real good for quite a long time. But you brought in Andre Silva from Milan, a guy that failed in Milan, and you bring him in to replace someone that almost won you a cup on its own. So they botched completely the summer. That includes the coach as well. Kovac was replaced by Hutter, that hasn't been doing well. And they're not close to be relegated for now. They're 7 points ahead. But nonetheless, as I said before, for Borussia Monchengladbach, this is a weird season. I wouldn't be surprised if some teams just start falling off and don't recover in time to avoid relegation or to get back to Europa League contention or Champions League contention, because that's just how this season is going to be. And Frankfurt is a team that last year impressed everyone. This was a team that everybody was talking about, like the way they played, the young stars, and they didn't turn over in their personnel well at all. And even the players they kept from last year, for example, Kostic, which has also been, has been in the Bundesliga for a long time. He was in Hamburg before coming over to Frankfurt. He's also one of these other guys that's been leading the locker room. His fall off this year is definitely, something that has impacted the team on the pitch. He had some flashes yesterday against Bayern Munich, but nothing much. So between losing Rebic and Jovic and having Kostic kind of regressing and the other players around him regressing as well, Fernandes, Abraham in defense, even Trapp hasn't been as good as he was last year, being one of the best goalkeepers in the Bundesliga. So overall, this team is definitely in need of a rebuild, and it's sad to say because honestly, it was one of those teams that I was really looking forward to see the development this season. As I said, they haven't replaced their stars, and I think they missed the window there. Because I don't think, if they managed to stay competitive this season, I don't see why they couldn't have been competing with Bayern, Borussia Monchengladbach or Bayer Leverkusen for a Champions League spot. Because I think they had what it took last year. Again, lost a lot of pieces. Some of the pieces that came back didn't provide as much of a performance as they did the year before, and I think the coach change also affected them negatively. So I think this is just it just tells you how important programming your season, not just one season by one season, but on the long run, it's much more important than it seems, because a team like this could have been good for many years if just they had the ability to provide their veterans with replacements that could come in. We talked about this last week with Bayern Munich and their philosophy, and I think Frankfurt could have been back to be relatively, important in the table if they did that. They didn't, and they let Jovic go. And of course, for that amount of money, you do so, but then you have to bring in players that can help you right away. And Bastos and Andre Silva are nowhere close to be as good as Jovic was for them last year. So you never know in football. They may just strike a deal for an incredible young striker, bring him in, and he's gonna be the next big deal. But for the time being, I'm very disappointed in this team, and I was expecting much more. And I hope for them they can avoid relegation, but I wouldn't be so sure, because this season can show, can give us a lot of surprises. So we'll see what happens there. But definitely a big failure of the week, but of the season in general. But now let's get into this week's game of the week. Bayern, Borussia Dortmund. This is a game that, every season it's an interesting game to watch because at the end of the day, right now, those are the two best teams in the Bundesliga. In terms of the talent that they have, the players around them, even the history and what they've been doing recently, those are the two teams that every year when the schedule comes out, you look at when they play. But this season, it's more important than that. It's not just a classic German game. It's a game that could be, for both teams, extremely important because on one hand, you have Bayern. You have Bayern that if they win, they get 7 points clear from the second one with 7 games left. And considering how they're playing, I don't think Bayern Munich can lose many games from here to the end of the season, even if they drop in form, which I don't think they will because at the end of the day, this is a team that still has to play in the Champions League. So the way they're going to prepare physically for the rest of the season, it's going to be different. So Bayern is one of those teams that I really believe could actually peak much later compared to others, which is impressive on itself because they have been doing great so far. Granted, they haven't played amazing teams with Union Berlin in the first game, solid team, but nothing much. And Frankfurt, we just talked about a team that's falling down, falling into pieces. And, they did well and they were impressive. But again, the competition wasn't great. So I think Bayern is actually one of those teams that we will see at its best halfway through June, beginning of July. On the other hand, you have Borussia Dortmund, which have impressed so far in terms of how well they came back after a long stop. Form-wise, they're pretty good. First game was more impressive than the second one, but the first game was against a team that hasn't been able to find the right formula there to succeed. Schalke, they lost this week as well, and they honestly could not make a play. They changed, like I suggested. I'm not saying that they listened to my podcast, but I'm saying they followed the same kind of pattern of thinking that I did explain the other week. The back three defense wasn't working for them. I didn't think they had the right players, or at least they weren't placed in the right positions. They went back to a 4 players line in their defense, and to be honest, defensively they did quite okay. They lost against Augsburg, but they didn't do dreadful compared to what they did in the game against Dortmund. However, offensively they were trash. Nonetheless, Dortmund won against them, and then they won their second game this past weekend against Wolfsburg, which is definitely a better competition. And even the way they played, they ended up playing 10 men at the end of the game, but nonetheless, they in my opinion, they had a pretty strong performance against the Dortmund team that managed to score twice and did a good job defensively as well. They had a bit of a fall in their defensive game plan, especially in the second half when Hummels came off the pitch for Emre Can that was placed there in the middle of the back three defense that they have. Although it's never a back three defense, but for the sake of the scheme, that's how they are placed on the pitch. So Emre Can came in replacing Hummels. It was there in the middle of Piszczek and Akanji, but I feel like defensively, he can play in the back three defense, maybe on the side though, middle. I don't think he has enough personality to kind of move the other pieces around. But nonetheless, they managed to come out with 3 points. And they played well. Not as impressive as the first game, but still, for a team that hasn't played in 2 months, I think they are pretty good already, compared to what I would expect. And that's just further proof of how good Favre has been for them, preparing for this last rush. And this game, as I said, important for Bayern to go 5 points clear, but so important for Dortmund because a win here will take them 1 point behind Bayern. And as I said, I don't see Bayern making many mistakes from here to the end of the season, but I don't see Dortmund making them either because if this is the form they have now, I think the more we go, even if they do decrease, that's going to be kind of proportionate to other teams. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And I think Dortmund will give everything they have because they know losing this game is going to compromise their chance to win the title probably for the rest of the season. So it's so important for both teams to have a strong performance on Tuesday afternoon. And I personally think that they will actually be favourite in this game. At least, the way I see it, I think Dortmund will actually start this game as favourites. And there is one main reason why I think so. And that's because now we have 5 substitutions allowed per game. And that for a team like Borussia Dortmund is going to be critical. This is a team that this past week had, Sancho, one of the hottest players in the world right now, like one of those young talent that's going to be wanted by so many teams in the next few years. Probably going to move away from Dortmund sooner rather than later. They had Reina, another super young guy that I think is going to be their next star, probably. And they had Emre Can, as I said, on the bench. Probably they're going to try and see if Witsel can come back, but unlikely. As of right now, I don't think he'll be back for this game. But nonetheless, they have bench players that can come in and make an impact. On the other hand, you have Bayern that doesn't have that. Bayern is an incredible team, but bench-wise, it's not as strong compared to what Borussia has right now, because Bayern doesn't have Coutinho injured. Sule, which would be the perfect guy to put on Haaland, they don't have him. They won't have Tolisso. They won't have probably Thiago Alcantara. Javi Martinez is not 100%. He hasn't played yet since coming back from the coronavirus stoppage, and those are all players that in that midfield could be fundamental for Bayern even off the bench, and they don't have that. And you have always that question mark of Coman. Can he do a full game 100%? Of course, he came out of the pitch this past weekend because apparently he had a knee injury, so we don't even know if he's going to be back, and if he is, can he play a full game? So, they would need more bench pieces in order to compete, in my opinion, with a Dortmund side that can switch 5 players that they do have. They have that talent already on their bench. So I think that's going to be a big, big factor in this game. And the other thing, I talked about the fullbacks being incredibly important nowadays, football, and I do believe so, and I do believe that this game is going to be, decided for the majority of it on the left and right wings, right? With, as I said, Guerrero and Hakimi coming in. The other side, you have Pavard and Davies. And then, of course, those are just the defensive players, but then Brandt and Hazard that have been incredible run as of late. You get Coman and Perisic on the other side. But I think the main players that are going to be deciding this game are Thomas Müller and Haaland. The Thomas Müller matchup is going to be interesting to watch, because it doesn't matter who's going to take him, Emre Can or Dahoud or Delaney. I don't know who's going to start for them. I have an idea it's going to be Emre Can because of his physicality. But the priority for Borussia, it has to be to stop Thomas Müller. Thomas Müller, especially after Bayern sacked Kovac to bring in Flick back actually in the game against Dortmund, the first leg, where Bayern destroyed Dortmund 4-0. But anyway, since Flick came in, Müller has been unreal. He has 17 assists this season in the Bundesliga, as well as 7 goals. So he has been unbelievable. And this is a guy that, is getting to a certain age where probably at some point he's going to regress. But he's been in this side since 2010. And since then, he never stopped going up. He won the World Cup with Germany in 2014. He's won the Champions League with Bayern in 2013. Won countless titles. And this is such an underrated player, in my opinion. This is a guy that when you look at him, when you watch him play, it doesn't strike you as a good player. And that's just how it is, because his coordination is completely wrong. But there is no explanation to why he's so good, but he is. And I think this is going to be a critical matchup that Borussia has to win in order to win the game. And on the other hand, you have Haaland, of course, which is the player that Bayern has to take care of. And I think this could actually be, a point where Bayern is going to suffer quite a lot. Because, of course, this guy is normally hard to stop, right? But Bayern right now, they have their centre-back pair is Boateng, that until December was considered to be an ex-player, former player. It was basically, they were trying to send him away. During the summer, there were talks about him going to Juventus, him going to Roma. He stayed. Flick brought him back to be a centerpiece in that defense. He's doing okay. He's been doing okay. At the end of the day, he's a great player. So even if he's getting worse with age, it is still high enough of a level to be starting in this team. But the other centre-back is Alaba, which has been playing there. The guy's been playing all over the pitch with his national team. He plays count. He's been playing left wing for Bayern. Left back, of course, that's his main position. But Bayern have been using him as a centre-back. And he's been doing well. That again, he's a great player. Great players find a way to play everywhere. Okay? So I'm not surprised by the fact that he's been doing well. But when you come against a guy like Haaland, especially considering what he's shown us so far, This guy's been unbelievable, and the fact that he's so physical as a player, I think, could be an issue for Bayern, because David Alaba, I don't think he can take him one-on-one. So we'll see how they manage to handle that one. Not having Sule is going to be an issue in my opinion, because he would be the perfect guy to take on Haaland, because Sule is such a massive player, and he allows you to leave him alone with Haaland in one-on-ones, because it's very hard for players in general to go past Sule. So it would be stopping Haaland before he can progress with his incredible pace and get towards goal. So they don't have him. It's going to be an issue, and we'll see. But I think, as I said, two key matchups here are going to be Emre Can, whoever plays that centre mid role, against Thomas Müller, and on the other side, it's going to be how well Alaba can handle Haaland. But overall, I'm expecting a lot out of this game, and I think we're not going to be disappointed. I think both teams will give everything they have, because, as I said, it's a critical matchup for both of them, and probably more for Dortmund than Bayern, because this is the point of no return for them. If they lose this game, they're probably out of the race. So it's definitely going to be something to watch. And as I said, Tuesday afternoon, 5:30 UK time, 6:30 European time. Definitely tune in. I'm pretty sure everybody who's listening would do it anyway, but I'm telling you, this could be one of the most interesting German derbies we've had in a while. So only 24 hours to go, basically, to another football match. So we went from not having games to be overloaded with games, but that's all I'm asking for. So the more the better. We should get more news about other leagues as well in the coming weeks. So seems like football is going to be back full time, so that's great to hear. Anyway, for whoever of you is listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. A 5-star review would be great. Or just a comment. I appreciate everybody who's listening. Thank you very much for the support. And I will see you all on Wednesday. Until then, this was the Sports with Frank podcast. I've been Francesco. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.